Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We are continuing in the book of Psalms today. In not chapter, 94. The Psalm of Vengeance. It's interesting to me because I kind of thought I'd get through it in one. And it could be gotten through in one because it's quite easy to understand. There's depth within it. And then also for me, it's like, there's important thoughts that we need to get at here. Let's read it again. And I'll preface this with things I've been thinking about. Because the vengeance of God is a necessary thing. And we have to, on some level, we are to call for it. The righteous slain are pictured under the altar of God. That is their testimony of their suffering and the things that they endured demands vengeance. That we have to come into a position where we are comfortable calling for vengeance because vengeance is due. Then I often don't feel comfortable with it because, again, like I said, I stand before God on the basis of mercy. But we do move along with Christ. And always remaining, humble, we know that the judgment of God must happen. That's why we still have crime and punishment. We don't say don't punish criminals. And there's a lot of confusion about what it's all about. I mean, imprisonment is sort of like, I don't know. I guess, I always think in terms of you start with children and then you raise them. But there gets to be a point, like, I don't know what you would do with an adult that never learned to mind. Never learned to, to bear the sword without poking people with it. Or learn that that's the only way to live. I don't know how you undo that except by God's power, but not by. There's no earthly way that I have. I mean, they try. In fact, when you hear about reformed people and criminals, there's never. I never heard someone like the local chapter of atheists was in the prison and they taught me reason. I mean, maybe there is that guy. I've never met him. There's always a religious component. Something, because you have to have something, you have to have one to look to who can judge, who can take vengeance. All right, let's read it before I go. I'll just go on and on and on. O Lord God, to whom vengeance belongeth. O God, to whom vengeance belongeth, show thyself. Lift up thyself. Thou judge of the earth, render a reward to the proud. Lord, how long shall the wicked triumph? How long shall they utter and speak hard things? And all the workers of iniquity boast themselves. They break in pieces thy people, O Lord, and afflict thine heritage. They slay the widow and the stranger, and murder the fatherless. Yet they say, the Lord shall not see, neither shall the God of Jacob regard it. Understand, ye brutish among the people, and ye fools. When will ye be wise? He that planted the ear, shall he not hear? He that formed the eye, shall he not see? He that chastiseth the heathen, shall not he correct? He that teacheth man knowledge, shall not he know? The Lord knoweth the thoughts of man, but they are vanity. Blessed is the man whom thou chastenest, O Lord, and teachest him out of thy law, that thou mayest give him rest from the days of adversity, until the pit be digged for the wicked. For the Lord will not cast off his people, neither will he forsake his inheritance. But judgment shall return unto righteousness, and all the upright in heart shall follow it. Who will rise up for me against the evildoers? Or who will stand up for me against the workers of iniquity? Unless the Lord had been my help, my soul had almost dwelt in silence. When I said, my foot slippeth, thy mercy, O Lord, held me up. In the multitude of my thoughts within me, thy comforts delight my soul. Shall the throne of iniquity have fellowship with thee, which frameth mischief by a law? They gather themselves together against the soul of the righteous, and condemn the innocent blood. But the Lord is my defense, and my God is the rock of my refuge. And he shall bring upon them their own iniquity, and shall cut them off in their own wickedness. Yea, the Lord our God shall cut them off. Something immediately that jumped out at me that I think I got wrong. Who will rise up for me against the evildoers? Well, I'm going to take a different perspective. I got a different perspective on it. So maybe I got it wrong. You be the judge. It's not a wrong idea, but perhaps a wrong interpretation. You know, who will rise up for me against the evildoers? Who will stand up for me against the workers? Well, I mean, the Lord. Well, if I'm saying it, I didn't take that perspective. What I think I got wrong is I should have at least looked at that perspective. Like, who is speaking? I only looked at that as if, because I really wanted it to be the Lord. Because I like the idea of God making that call. And as though vengeance calls to me. Because vengeance belongs to God, and the psalm is acknowledging that vengeance belongs to God. But I want to take vengeance. There's a certain part of me that relishes the thought. Depending on, not with lack of proportionality, but for great wrongs, I feel a certain satisfaction in seeing, and everyone's done this. Tell me you haven't seen a movie where you see the villain get it in the end, and you weren't like, yeah, or at least to some degree, feeling a certain satisfaction. And if you don't, then there's something probably wrong with you, because that's generally how people are. I'm not wrong, different about you. Let's just say it's just you're differently sensitive to things like that. Well, because it's like, I have sympathy also for psychopaths. And it's like, imagine having that kind of a mind, So, it's not impossible. They're not just automatically down the drain hole. So, that's why, not that it's like a whole lot, but, but the Lord demonstrates that there is, there's no one, no kind of person really, ultimately, is what I would say, that is out of his reach. You know what I mean? But, so let's take that perspective. Whatever. So there's no end of it. Okay, fine. So, in that case, it would be, who will rise up for me against the evildoers? Is there someone who can help the evildoers that oppress me? Right? The Lord will not cast off. He will not forsake his inheritance. That's assurance of salvation. I know I'm going back a little bit just because to take in this other idea. We have assurance of salvation. Also, when I said that, I thought, I did talk about this, but also I wanted to relate it to that, the idea that I will never leave thee nor forsake you. I'm with you always even to the ends of the earth. Your faith, why is your faith assurance of salvation? I'll tell you why. Because you don't provide your faith. God gives it to you, that revelation, and that fact that you're able to see it. God makes that happen. It's the gift of God. Blessed are your eyes, is something Jesus said in regard to this idea. Because Jesus primarily is one who demonstrates that faith is a gift. In fact, in Paul the Apostle lists faith, and I take that to be extraordinary faith, because without faith it is impossible for anyone to be saved, but that's a gift in and of itself. In fact, I have often suspected that in the parable of the talent, it wouldn't be inappropriate to think of that one talent as, let's call it a declaration of faith. Because I wouldn't want to call it real faith, an affirmation of faith. Because people can have all kinds of things come out of their mouths. That's not confession. True confession implies that it's true. When you lie, that's false testimony. That's called perjury. There's a lot of names for that, but it's not confession. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive them. But the point is, our heart has to confess Jesus. With the tongue, confession is made unto salvation. It is salvation, because you can't just say these things without meaning sincerely, without them actually coming from God. Our sincere faith is the result of God's mercy towards us. And in that, the fact that, because faith is a gift, that demonstrates that you're being saved by God, not by you. And God, because that's what people say, can you lose your salvation? How can you lose that which you have not obtained? You know what I mean? I can't lose that which I did not obtain. I did not obtain salvation so much as it was given to me. And the one who gave it still holds it in his hand. It's his to give. And if it was going to be taken away, it was his to take away. And he has assured through faith that that is not to be taken away. Now, from some shall be taken away even that which they seem to have, because they only seem to have it. And I refer to, specifically, there's a passage in Luke where he said, I used to have the exact passage memorized, but I can't remember the exact teens of it. I'm not going to look it up now. To him that has shall be given, and he shall have the more abundantly. But from him that hath not shall be taken even that which he seems to have. That's not what Jesus said. Look it up. You can, that's not a hard scripture to look up, and it's in Luke. That's good enough. That's good enough for me. I'd be able to find it. So we can trust he will not cast off his people. You having faith is evidence that you are his people. Now with confidence, take that faith and mold yourself into the man or woman of God that he has ordained for you to be. That's what you do. That's what it's like. If someone teaches you something else, don't listen to them. Follow on in faith. Do not just stop at go. The light is green. We must now run the race. Go run the race. If you die tomorrow, everything's fine. It's all right. Yes, you are still saved. You don't have anything more to do as far as for salvation. But now, let's run the race that we've signed up for. Because to merely run the race is salvation itself. We are more than conquerors. We are more than victors. We do not beat the air. So in that sense, who will rise up for me against it? Well, I can't look to anyone except God. That's why I thought God is calling, saying, who will stand up for me? Because he's often saying, I will take it to myself. He put on righteousness as a breastplate and a helmet of salvation on his head, and he put on the garments of vengeance for clothing and was clad with zeal as a cloak. According to their deeds will he repay. According to the deeds, fury to his adversaries, recompense to his enemies. Isaiah 50-something. 7, 8. He will return recompense. So shall they fear the name of the Lord. So, no one. So the workers of iniquity, the powers of this world. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. To take this turn of it. Well, it's the same way anyways, right? We wrestle not against flesh and blood. Really, like I said, the thing I said was true. It just might not be the right perspective that was intended by this. But then again, The Spirit can show us even more things. Because, like, the author's intent is not always the same as the Spirit's intent. And I know that for a fact because we have the words of the chief priest, who said it is necessary that one man should die, that the nation perish not. And he was talking about Christ, and he was talking about Christ. But he didn't know he was talking about Christ the way he was talking about Christ. That he would die for the sins of the people, and that through his sacrifice they should be saved and not perish, but have everlasting life. He had no idea of that. But his words, he meant something totally different. And so the psalmist could totally mean what he said, and maybe the Spirit meant what I said. And it doesn't, and I'm not claiming that so much as just saying it can be considered. You may consider that as a possibility. Like, meaning and this is, of course, and I'm not saying the principle is absolutely true. I'm just saying in this case you may consider it. The principle you should know is true. You think about things like the prophecies concerning Christ in Isaiah, like a virgin shall conceive. People will say like, but of course there was a historical. Yes, Isaiah had in mind a young maiden in his own time who would conceive and bear a child, and who did, and that was the sign. But that was not the fulfillment of what the Spirit had given. Because this passage also very much reminds me of that place in Isaiah in 6. That in Isaiah plus 6, where he's called, and he says, "Here am I, send me." I mean, I almost whatever. I didn't, because I was thinking of just how when I first, when I called on God, I didn't feel called so much as I called out. I cried out, "Lord, save me." And my foot has slipped many a times, and I have seen myself saved by God's mercy. It's like there's a lot of ways in which we could go down. A multitude of my thoughts within me that comforts my soul. I have oftentimes many thoughts. Multitudes of thoughts. Out of a multitude of business cometh forth a dream. Oftentimes we have dreams, and it's related to because our life is just overpacked with thoughts and concerns and all that. I certainly am no stranger to that. I mean, having raised, I can't say I've raised 8 children, but I've raised, I guess, 6 children, and I have 2 children left. So I do know, as you can imagine, there's things that go along with that. I mean, just there's a lot of thought that has to go into all that. A lot of concerns, a lot of challenges, a lot of, etc. I have no complaints. But it's certainly, I mean, I pour out my complaints sometimes to my wife, but but what I'm saying is, but overall, no complaints. Because because in the midst of all that, the comforts of God give us, peace. Like when Jesus, I compared that to the peace that Jesus talked about, not as the world gives. The peace that God gives is not the same as the world, because the world can't give you peace, that kind of peace that comes in that tumultuous, fearful moment. The peace of the world is founded upon the idea of security by, visible, rational, real things. I mean, we can trust we're secure, and not like I talked about with throwing yourself off the temple. And as far as the temptation of Christ in the psalm we covered a few weeks ago, or a week or so ago, the one that Satan quoted to Jesus when he was tempting him to throw himself off. We need to, make sure we do not. We're not going to tempt God in the way we live out all these things. Anyways, so the throne of iniquity have fellowship with thee, which frameth mischief by a law. And they, I don't know how not to get a little bit political about that. It's not political because it's like this is just I say political, but you know what people would say, oh, the whole Bible is political. It's Jesus talking to the Pharisees is a political interaction. It is, you know, because Jesus is what? It's a kingdom. I mean, that's ultimately. I mean, because though I would consider myself a Christian libertarian and would tell people to consider me such, everyone knows I'm a crypto authoritarian. Secretly, crypto means that inside I serve an authoritarian dictator who's God. Now, he's not exactly, he's benevolent, and he doesn't exactly exercise, because I'm also a dictator at home. I am. But I try not to be, but I try to be the kind of dictator you want to have around, right? Someone's like, oh, we'll go to the dictator. He'll tell us what to do. He'll solve the problems. He'll make everything right. That's why people are tempted to authoritarians. Well, in Christ, we have a King of Kings on which to rest all that authority. And cannot be corrupted by the same things that men are corrupted by. So, there is on the earth, like I said, well, I was talking about the tempting in the, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there because I had something onto something there. But, and it'll come back around, and you may have guessed already. But we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. That's the throne of iniquity. That is the world. And the powers thereof. And you can say like, well, how can a man, like Paul would say, well, no man who entangles himself with the affairs of this life can, right? There's a certain, yeah, and that's true. Like to me though, that is the affairs of this life is sometimes just getting a meal, taking care of your body, taking care of your family. There's a baseline of that you are required to take care of. And then to go beyond that, and then there's times at which, like when the Lord was present or at the end times, which you have to just in faith sometimes leave those things if they prevent you from obeying God and doing what you have to do. That's a thing. You have to be very careful about assessing when that's appropriate, because a lot of times for selfish reasons, people will justify doing things that could be justified under certain circumstances. There is a certain situational ethic to it, because it's like which is greater. Yes, Martha and Mary, one was cumbrous about serving. It's not that that's always a bad thing. Sometimes you got to get the service done. Otherwise, we're all just going to be hungry and we're not going to eat. But sometimes it's like, well, screw eating. Jesus is here. If Jesus shows up to my house, I expect everyone to pay attention to him and probably not do other stuff. But there's some baseline level of that you have to be entangled with. And that's why in war, he says, in the analogy Paul brings up, when he says, no man that warreth entangles himself with the affairs of this life. Because while you're at war, what do? They take care of you. They send you food. They send you things. And that's part of what he was getting at as far as for himself. It's like, I affirm it also, that they that preach the gospel, they that live to preach the gospel, have to somewhat live of it. The gospel has to support them. That's fine. And that's not a pitch for me because I don't ask that. I hope to never ask it because I don't know why I would have to. And like I said, unless I was doing it full time. If I was doing it full time and I couldn't support myself, I'd probably be inclined to rely on a small circle of people instead of just going out to strangers, I guess. And I know there's other reasons, whatever. But, I'm not particularly inclined to go down that way. But the throne of iniquity, which frameth mischief by a law. I'm saying get political about it. What I'm saying is like when we have a veritable crime against humanity happening in front of us. And what I mean is like when people are threatened to lose their jobs unless they get a particular experimental medical treatment, which was which let me just say that the all the information around it was at least slight, like when it came out, was somewhat misinformational apparently. And there was a lot of sort of stuff they let you believe that wasn't true, and a lot of stuff they said that wasn't true. They said as if it was true. And this is all coming out now, and it's like, it had a stink about it at the time. I remember people getting mad at me because I said I would consider taking it, because to me I was just like, well, I'm going to consider it. What do you think? I'm just going to not look at it, just reflexively? I don't reflexively do things. I mean, unless it's something that's just, unless someone just, like if someone walks up to me on the street with a needle and says, hey, let me give you this, I'm going to reflexively jump away and say, hey, get the hell away from me with that, I was thinking today, I wish today when I did the song for the BS Pandemic, when I did the video for We Fall on Our Swords, instead of doing like Hara Curry, I wish I'd just been like, we fall on our swords. At your will. We fall on our swords. Now, that wasn't done with a law. But, I don't know, when I live in a world where people are being subject to this, where people will tell me, like, they don't want to, but they're afraid to lose their job, and they're being pressured, and it's all based on lies. I mean, to me, whatever, it's all based on lies, and whenever people base things on lies like that and deception and coercion, it's like I have to stand up against it. I don't follow the churches, but the whole church world was seduced to being compliant to the all the BS with the pandemic on this notion that it was a love your neighbor issue. Yeah, I remember I was thinking those exact thoughts. That was my thoughts. In fact, love thy neighbor is what forced me to take my mask off. And, I stopped. I couldn't wear it unless it was demanded of me, like in a hospital. And I was like, okay, hospital's fine. That's why I took it off after a couple of weeks. And it was after Memorial Day. Because I went to the protest. I always remember that. Oh, the video came out on Memorial Day. It was before Memorial. Yeah, I always remember it based on the timeline of the Bloodstained Bible, because that protest was where I was inspired to start writing those songs. But and they're about to, even our the CDC decided, oh yeah, everyone should get this, and now our governor says, well, he's not going to mandate it. And they're going to leave it to the legislature. The legislature, if they make a law against this, a law along this against the people, is what I should say, that's an atrocity. To force children, or they can't go to school. I never really wanted to send my kids to school, but I don't know. It's like, that is just absolutely horrific. Endangering their futures for the sake of what? The profit of some giant corp? Because that's all it's really down to, is we're selling this expensive treatment for a not very dangerous disease. And it's obscene. Now, what is the word mischief there? Because, they make all kinds of things legal. Legalized mischief, I think we're about to legalize mischief in Illinois. At least that's what I hear. We're going to have no cash bail or something like that. Makes me glad I'm not living in the city or the suburbs anymore, or the exurbs, or any place that wouldn't strike fear into a heart of a intelligent criminal. They say, maybe I stay away from a place like that. Yep, you probably should. All right. What verse is it? 20. Okay. Mischief here is. I want to just get it on the screen. There we go. Though you can't even see the pop-up. I don't know. Amal. Well, that's evil as toil, troublesome. Let's see. Trouble labor, or toil. Mischief doesn't quite cover it, does it? Like we think mischief, like I'm up to mischief. It used to mean it used to have a much more, like we think of mischief as something a child gets up to, but it's childish mischief. But actually, mischief in English carried a more force, like it would be wicked. I believe. I actually don't know what I've never actually looked at the like where that chief to mischief. I don't know what the. I should look into that sometime. I'm not gonna do it right now. Wearing effort, hence worry, whether of body or mind, grievousness, mischief, toil. Yeah, that pretty much covers how, a lot of times lawmaking ends up. They grieve people. They cause more grief with their more laws. I'll tell you what, they certainly did that over the past of the couple of years. And it's going to get worse. They're trying to suppress and hold down the gas prices before the election because because if they didn't, they'd be skyrocketing. They suspended a lot of the taxes. They've released oil from the strategic reserves, and now they're almost out of diesel fuel. And blah blah blah. I don't know why it's probably because we don't have enough diesel refineries or something. Because people are saying it's easier to make diesel, but it's like, but if you don't have the machine, it's easier to, fuel a locomotive that runs on wood. Theoretically, I mean, it's easier, but also you need to have ready means to get all the wood you need to run something like that. It's like, or it's easier to just use a horse for transportation. Just jump on a horse, but how many horses are there? Is there horses for everybody? Right. So, but they framed mischief. I think the most toilsome thing they did with laws was over the pandemic, all that spending. And I don't mean yes, the money they gave to individuals and all that extra unemployment they paid out. But hey, they stopped people from working. So, you got to pay them. There's an inevitable logic of all that. But there's also an inevitable consequence. If you'd read Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics, you'd understand. Eventually, everything that you ever used to buy is going to be about 50% more. Everything's going to be 50% more than it was, and probably even more than that. Because about 50% of the money that exists was printed during the pandemic or whatever, something like that, right? This is a guesstimate around the area. I'm not but I know enough about these things to say that you can't just make up all that money out of nowhere and not have it affect prices. It's just a law of economics. Prices will eventually get to the point where they stabilize at the value of what the money was. Because there's no actual value being added. There's just extra denominations. It just means everything's going to cost more. They can't not raise the prices. The prices will rise. And this guy gets the point. Like I said, if there was $2 trillion and they printed $1 trillion, then that's everything that was $2 got to cost $3 or more. And there's some variations. Some things haven't gone up at all, have they? But other things have gone up 2 times. Anyways, well, they have this law, and the thing is, it's not just the payments to individuals, which are bad enough and destructive enough, but also they bought billions and billions of dollars of medical treatments for the disease they created and all that garbage and all that. But all this money spent. And now there's throwing billions of dollars at a war, which, they seem to have been successful at. But, when's it all end? What do we win by winning, by the way? What are we going to win? What's the prize? That's what I want to know. Because They talk about winning and losing wars. What do you win? What do we think we're going to win? What are we going to get out of this? Is there a way to win? You know what I mean? Like, when you're dealing with someone who has nuclear bombs, do you win that war? Anyways, the throne of iniquity. There's always, if you look back throughout history, there's always been unjust laws just framed to keep evil. To keep it. To what's I want to say? Well, to frame iniquity, essentially, right? I wonder what the word "frame" there. I didn't even think of that. I'm looking it up, like if it was maybe. I bet it means to frame, actually. Though, like what, picture frame? I mean, what do they mean frame? I thought house frame. Like you frame out. And that's why a picture frame is the same thing, same concept. Coming from the that very idea. So, what is the idea of framing here? I like when I look at the time. It's only just 37 minutes. I could do a 3-hour Bible study. I think it would not be good, though. It wouldn't be. It might get boring. It might already be boring. Now, don't say anything. It's not. Just sometimes, right? Frameth. Yatsar, to form or fashion. Yes, so frame is to form or fashion. More like framing a house than like... well, because here's the thing, it's like, is it any different than framing a criminal? You know what I mean? It's like they fashion, they mold, they structure iniquity by use of the law. You see how politicians enrich themselves. They get elected, they become rich. How is that? Because they use their ability and their inside knowledge as lawmakers to suck wealth from those people who are producing it. In turn, those people who produce the wealth realize that they're in a position where they're under the control of people who didn't do anything but have power over them. And so they realize they need to influence these people. So they start giving more money to them in order to make sure they frame the laws so that they can get more money. And then this is a mutually beneficial arrangement. The politicians fleece the rich, and the rich give to the politicians. But when they talk about taxing the rich, they already don't pay for anything. They talk about making the rich, we'll do a new program, and we'll tax the rich to do it. They already don't tax people to do everything we do. That's why we have something called a deficit. That means we already don't pay for everything we spend money on. I mean, we're constantly have a growing debt that looks more and more ridiculously huge. Like when I was in the 80s, they called it the debt bomb. And there was a book like something like that, right? And you think about it. You ever played one of those games, like video games, or even just like old school, like where you fill up a water balloon, or I remember I actually played this in reality, but it kind of makes sense you would. Like imagine you have a balloon, and because there was like on, I think it was WarioWare and Nintendo, you pump up the balloon, and each player takes a turn pumping it a few times until it pops, and it's kind of like a case of hot potato, musical chairs, the odd man out kind of game. But that's what like they're doing. We'll just keep pumping it up, the debt, and just keep printing the money. It just keeps, in a sense, yes. But the problem is, if you do that too rapidly, if you don't allow it to stabilize, and especially if you disrupt the systems which undergird that, which give it our currency isn't based on gold, it's based on the full faith and credit of the American people, which used to be something people believed in, which I'm not so sure they should trust in so much anymore. Shall the throne of iniquity, and they put us in this massive debt. Not only us, but our descendants are in this massive debt. That's why. So they're either going to default on it or they're going to have to pay it back. Because there's no way you don't never pay it back. You know what I'm saying? We do somehow pay an interest on it. I mean, we've been borrowing for years. We're trillions of dollars in debt. And they keep getting richer and richer. And because here's the thing. They get rich. And hey, what's heck. So what? You got $10 trillion, or well, not $10 trillion. Let's say you got $5 million, but it's only, but it only buys what maybe $100,000 bought 50 years ago, right? But hey, but the guy with 100,000 years ago, 50 years ago, he was also rich. So what if your money doesn't have much purchasing? Well, if you don't have much money, it's like if you have millions of dollars, then if bread is $10 a loaf, what's it matter to you? That's what it costs to eat. But people who don't have anything or have less are going to struggle because to keep up with those changes and that volatility, when the rulers are insanely doing policies to dismantle and destroy the well-being of the people, and they create chaos and uncertainty, and everything goes, because they've bought into this obsessive climate nonsense, and as far as like the feel that they have to, here's what I mean by obsessive climate nonsense. I don't mean that global warming isn't happening or nonsense. Like, I'm not saying that, because I don't know. Apparently they say it's getting a bit warmer, and it is a bit warmer, and perhaps it is. It's hard to tell when you don't know if the scientific community has been captured and is just being governed by ideologues. I don't know whether I can believe them any more than I would believe a department of theology. I don't listen to just authority figures. Why would I do that? I encountered the living God, so I don't bother with men. All right, sorry. And you don't have to, consider me a man. You go encounter the living God. You can learn from me, but test the things that I say, by all means. Again, I don't say that a lot because my first teacher used to always say, "Oh, check me out and this and that, and don't trust me and all that." You can trust that I'm trying to get it right. We have to be, if we can't trust our brothers to some degree, I mean, but again, don't put your trust in man. But we do as a body, and in love one towards another, and in faith towards God, in company with another, and being, we do, because I have people I trust. Not the way I trust with the Lord. I don't trust them for my salvation. It's a different thing. Just like call no man your father. It's like, but your dad, you can call him father because it's okay. Because he is your father. So it's okay. You're not calling him dad. That's what his name is. That's not just his name. That's his actual status. So the rhetorical question, the answer is no. No, the throne of iniquity shall not have fellowship with thee. Those that frame iniquity through law, who they frame the toil. Like I said, they're going to make, I don't know how it's going to end up. I don't, but I can guess it's probably not good. It's going to be, I'm not afraid personally, much. I'll tell you what. I take the steps I can. I've been learning more about growing more food and thinking about staple crops and stuff, and because just in case. But I've already looked at the problem and realized it's like, man, I am so not equipped to feed my family by myself. But I've always relied on the Lord. It's like He showed me in dreams. It's like, if I die, I die. But if it's the end times and God needs me to preach or to do something, it's like, well, you know what? Like the prophet Elijah, he can send birds to feed us. Or a widow will sustain you. It's not to be, and then the little bit of her meal in that will sustain all of you, because she didn't really have much. She had just a small bit of meal and a little bit of oil. But by the power of God, it was stretched so that they could survive for much longer than that. I forgot how long it was. It was probably something like 40 days or something like that, or maybe long. I forget. Forget that detail. The Lord is my defense, the God of my refuge. They gather themselves against the soul of the righteous to condemn the innocent blood. Like I said, well, you know what? Because that's the thing is like, since they never pay, they just make more money. And then what they do is they make more money, they give you a little bit, and then they take a lot of it and give it to their friends who then kick it back to them. That's how it works. And how and how does that really do harm to people? Well, because without having to be made to raise taxes, you know what I mean? Because they could raise all that money by just increasing taxes on everybody. And they wouldn't destroy the rich and their pals because, or they couldn't, they can't do that. I mean, well, because here's the thing. If you overtax the rich, you won't have any rich people. And then who do you tax? Well, then, you know what I mean? After you tax all the rich people and they're not rich anymore and they can't make more riches because the means to make riches, because every rich person I knew was ever really tight with money and, like the money was a big thing to them. And they were with the money and keeping the money and guarding the money and the money, But if you want them to produce wealth and pay taxes, you have to kind of you have to allow them to keep most of that. You can't just take it all away. And plus, they're the pals of the politicians now, so they don't take it from them. So, you have to find ways to tax everybody else. So in Illinois, we do it through like incredibly high license plate fees, all kinds of incredibly high fees and incredibly high taxes on cigarettes and other things, the typical, right? Which disproportionately affect the poor. I'm sure poor people in Illinois probably pay way more taxes than, as far as like that goes. Yeah, as far as there's a lot of, as far as a proportion of their income with the sales and all that stuff. Because the basic necessities of life, if you're living off of a very small amount, you'd be surprised how much of that is going towards taxes. On top of what comes out of your paycheck. Anyways. So the other way is you just print more money. And like I said, then you print brand new money, and then you and your friends take a big chunk, and then you give some scraps to everybody else. Not that we should have, they should have just left everybody alone is what they should have done. Scraps to everybody else. They take a big chunk. And then it all gets paid for by the prices rising everywhere. We pay more. And that's why the poor pay the worst because, again, all things being equal, I mean, as far as like I eat the same amount about as any other person and I live... It costs about the same to house me as it does any other person. Just all things being equal. I'm just saying, like, to put me in a house and to have me in a vehicle, it all costs about the same. So each person has the same baseline needs for the most part. Needs. And if all you can do is provide your needs and they now cost 50 or double, that's going to... that's going to truly hurt. And anyone who would speak against it, it's like there's a universal chorus. I mean, and I don't see how it really, though I will recommend voting for the one party over the other, and y'all know who, right? At the same time, it's like there's so few among them who really are willing to stand up and fix these things because there's no political will among the people until it becomes a disaster. Because it'll require some sort of austerity or something. They'll have to cut back on things. We won't be able to just do everything we're doing. It's like someone's living a lifestyle where they got their credit card out, right, all the time, and they're going to the movies and eating out, right, and they're running up a credit card bill, and they got maybe a dozen credit cards, and they just keep running them up because we are insanely running up on our credit. And it just, who is insane enough to believe that we could just do that forever? We'll not just do it forever. We'll do it at a faster rate. We'll start giving everyone free college. We'll give everyone free preschool. We'll give everyone a free car, a free washer, a free dryer, free solar panels, right? Why not? Why not everything free? Minimum wage, $50 an hour, $100 an hour. Vote for me. Minimum wage, $100 an hour, and nobody has to work. Everyone gets $10,000 a month to stay home. Right? That's my campaign. What's wrong? What, you don't want people to have good things? You don't want everyone to prosper? Well, we'll just tax the rich. And we'll just print the money. What heck? Let's just be honest here. We'll just print the money. It'll be fine. It's real money. It's the government. As long as the government prints it, it's real. And there's no limit. Is there? Is there no limit? That's a new one to me because I've always found that everything is limited except God. And I think that, some of it's unintentional. Like some of the things, like the Great Society, right? There was incredible inflation after the Great Society went into effect in the 70s and stuff. Also Vietnam War. We were doing a lot of spending. Government spending was exploding in that time, and inflation went through the roof. But then it kind of calmed down because we stopped a lot of that. And now we've gotten back to it. To really, because it's always growing because the supply is growing, but slowly. But when you just keep doing this over and over again, I said they think about it. Because all, like I said, all it is borrowing money from the future. And how much money is there in the future? How far into the future do you get to borrow from people? You know what I mean? Is it moral to borrow from future people? Like, is it moral of you to take, and I mean of government people who pass these laws, to take money from my grandchildren to pay for what? Solar panels today that will be, whose functional period of usableness and efficiency is going to expire before they are even before they're even 50. I forget exactly how, but within their lifetime, let's say that within the lifetime of my grandchildren, all the solar panels are going to be needing to be replaced. It's a lie. It's not renewable. The sun's renewable, but your solar panel is not. How much stuff do we have to make those? How long can we make those? For how long? How many millennia can we make solar panels for? How much material do we have to keep making that stuff? And how much energy do we need to do it? Does anyone bother with the calculations? They don't even care. Because it's all about making themselves rich, selling people something they don't need. It's like the shots. They sold billions of dollars for shots. Billions of dollars for shots. They were going to recommend them for the kids. You know why? They bought them already. They already bought them. They're bought and paid for. Whatever. Why a psalm of vengeance? Because you know why? Deeds like that deserve revenge. There are certain people who I will not name, just for the sake of what I'm about to say. But I was thinking to myself, it would be, it makes you think okay, yeah. Maybe something appropriate would be have them, I don't know, pulled limb from limb on television. And then you have force all physicians to watch. This is what happens to people who forget about Nuremberg. Because it's not funny. It's not even, it should, like, it's obscene, the things that are going on in our world. But whatever, it is nothing new. They gather themselves against the soul of the righteous. This is, I said, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. So but against powers. That's what I'm saying. It's like, well, there are flesh and blood people in those powerful places. Like I said, and to those who would after occupy those positions should understand that they are accountable. And they will be held accountable for the things they do in those offices. That's the right way to do it. I don't know if we'll ever get a hold on that. Because that's pretty high stuff. You almost have to have the Lord to be able to really execute that. But still, we wrestle against it. You can't preach the gospel. We're going to preach the gospel. Don't you preach in the name of Jesus. We're going to preach in the name of Jesus. So I was saying, one of the worst things the National Institutes of Health did was they sent around that, I forgot his name right now. I'd like to mention it. Not Dr. Fauci, not Birx, but the other guy. Forgot his name. Mustachio Man. You may remember. He went around to the evangelicals and told them, oh, it's love your neighbor. Do for them. No, it's not true. And and like as always, and what is the motivation? It's very likely it's just simply riches, as always, and also hubris. Which is why I remember listening to a program on hubris and what it is, and I know that is what drives scientists to do things like, create super deadly viruses. It's hubris. But I'm having trouble coming up with a good definition. I know it's a kind of pride. And the way I want to define it, I think, is wrong. Like the words I'm thinking of using. So, it's all right. You may have an idea of what it means, and you may know what it means when they act that way. Again, and anyone who would speak up against this evil. When people do evil, they don't like people talking against it, right? And the righteous one who would speak up, well, they will gather themselves against them. And we saw, and I'm going to keep relating it to that. I don't care. We saw that when there was the Balfour Declaration and certain scientists, men of integrity. And this is why I say, this is why they said, don't do your own research. Because you could have looked at other scientists, what they were saying immediately. This was immediately known. Like I said, within weeks of the beginning of the thing, I was in full rebellion of it. Even though I honestly, from day one, I didn't obey the lockdowns. Okay, I confess. I brought my kids to see their grandpa because I'm not going to roll that way. We confronted the virus. That's the way I did it, and didn't lose anybody. But that's the thing. It's like when the righteous come against it, they condemn. They gather themselves against it, and you see this all the way down to the very end. So don't expect different. In the two witnesses, in the end times, in the book of Revelation, right? They make war against the saints. He makes war against the saints and overcomes them, ultimately killing them. It's interesting here because when I read this, it made me think of 2 Peter. When it talks about, and they shall utterly perish in their own corruption. That was the verse That's the pastor says, for God, I couldn't remember the context, but it's for if God spared, well, I remember only in context, for if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness and reserved unto judgment. And spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood on the world of the ungodly. I remember when I was confronted with the idea of universal reconciliation, I was considering it. I was like, okay, so this is how they interpret, because, we all interpret everything. And so when they see things like about passages about hell, they say, yes, there is this burning. But just like as Paul talked about the altar burning things and they themselves being saved, yet so as by fire, the burning represents the burning away of the evil and the iniquity. And so I looked at that and I'm like, okay, I get it. But the one verse that made me say I'm like, no, this is the verse that makes me feel like draw a line in the sand. Absolutely not. And it was 2 Peter. They shall utterly perish in their corruption. It's not that their corruption shall perish and they will go free from it because they will be, but in their corruption they shall perish. They get cut off in their wickedness. That's always terrified me. It's like, because when I called on the Lord, it was because I was near death. I felt I was in danger. I was close to being cut off in my wickedness. I'd done things I knew it was sin. I'd followed it. And now I thought, I'm going to die. And the Lord could cut me off right there. And it could mean that he was not pleased with me ever. I'm just saying. I don't want to cause people to fear. Just because the way it ought to cause people to fear. That's what it did in the early church when Ananias and Sapphira. There are those examples. Why are they there? Why do they exist? There's a reason. We ought to be sober-minded and not, it's like sometimes we laugh, sometimes we, it's all right to have a good time. It's all right to rejoice. The bridegroom is with us in a sense. He's gone, but he's also with us. I rejoice because he's more with me now than he was, in the past. But iniquity, when we get killed in the midst of it, or that also the implication is that it is the reason and there's like that we are perishing with our iniquity because it's tied to us and it must perish, and therefore we perish with it and in it, because we are, because we cannot free ourselves from our guilt for our sins. Because like I said, it's, you say, well, why should 50-year-old Paul answer for something that 20-year-old Paul did? Well, why should 50-year-old Paul answer for something that 70-year-old Paul did? Or vice versa? Or, why should one time predominate? Why not the whole man? Why not answer for everything you did from beginning to end? Because in every moment I was me. I didn't always have the same experience. Yeah, there's extenuating, sure. But ultimately, within that context, it may be diffused somewhat by, well, now the time and wisdom has come and it wouldn't be that way again. But still, in that moment, I was as evil as I was, which is evil enough to condemn me. But I look to God, lest I should be cut off in that, because it's not good. I never find verses that say that's a good thing. I want to die. I'm bearing witness to the truth, not having sin bear witness to me. That I'm a lie. The testimony of the sin. He brings upon them their iniquity, cuts them off in their wickedness. The thing is, he always is willing to give them enough rope to hang themselves. When I say God, an authoritarian, because I do believe in, every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess, and Christ's law shall be the law. But, God also has always, when you think about the way he has been toward man, he has not imposed himself, not harshly. It's like, but harshly would be like what he blinded Paul. Paul didn't consider that a harsh thing at all. He considered it great mercy from God to impose himself on him at all, to reveal himself to him, period. Same thing for me. If God should reveal himself to me, it is such a blessing. Even if that revelation shows me, my own, what would I say, more than worthlessness, just what an enemy of God I am. That's what Paul saw. I'm the enemy of God. I'm the enemy of God. I'd like to wake up to that. But having thought, that everyone, and this is the thing, they that kill you will think they're doing God's service. That's going to hurt. I know, it just burns me up. But you got to trust, God will take vengeance. He will cause them to know. He said, I will cause them to worship before thy feet and to know that I have loved you. God will cut them off, yes. Make him your defense. Make him your refuge. And they can condemn, but God will hold you up. They can kill, but God will raise you up. It's like we have to be faithful to God. Don't lie to God. Be honest with God. That's the worst thing people do is they lie to God about their relationship with God. Because they lie to people. I'm a Christian. I love Christ. Blah, blah, blah. But it's like, but do you love him? I said, do you want to hang out with God all day? Do you want to sup with him? He's at the door knocking. Do you really want him in? Do you really want Jesus around all the time? What would Jesus do? Well, he's right here. Let's ask him. Do you really want to live like that? That's what the kingdom is. I'm with you always. With you always. I said that art thing, but it's a little more serious than all that. All right, we'll go to Psalm 95 Monday. Thanks for joining me in this study. I guess we're done. Good enough. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to continuing on to another topic. I don't know. Vengeance is something that I don't know. I understand it, but at the same time, I feel like it just it draws. I guess because of the feeling of injustice of what we've gone through, and also because I see that in the world, and I know it's like, well, I have to speak against it. That's the thing. It's like, it's not necessarily. I can't get too caught up in trying to change everything, except to keep saying what's true. Because speaking the truth changes things. That is my whole. That's all the action I care to take. I will speak the truth, and I will do it with my music. Like I powerfully use the music to support the scriptures. I use the scriptures, what the scriptures have taught me, to make powerful music, to speak the truth to the world. Even truths that are not necessarily like I said, it's like I'm not sticking God into it necessarily of things, because it's like that's not always what the meaning is, but I do feel that it is something necessary to do. Because if I don't fight it, then what? I stood by while these things were done to people? I said nothing? That would be unacceptable. So we got to speak up in some way, even if just to our family and children and, and before God, to pour out your complaint, to pray, Anyways, see you Monday. Until then. He that sitteth in the heavens shall